Go ahead and get started. And I thank you all for attending today's faculty development session. Somewhat nervously, I feel like a graduate student here because this is one of my former graduate professors who I am going to introduce. And so I will tell you that at the University of Texas at Austin, John Daly is not a professor, he is a legend. He can fill a room of 350 to 500 undergraduates every single day. They will have rapt attention, and they will have difficult grades, and yet they will come back again and again, which is why I thought, gee, I'd like to know that trick. Maybe we should invite him down to talk a little bit about how he succeeds. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Daly. So Daly has the wonderful titles you would expect of somebody with so much experience and talent. He is the Liddell Centennial Professor of Communication. He is a University Distinguished Teaching Professor, TCB Professor of Management in the McCombs School, and an Adjunct Professor of Pharmacy. He has published more than 100 articles and chapters in scholarly publications and completed 6 books. He has been named a Distinguished Teacher by UT System and a Distinguished Scholar by the National Communication Association, our home association. He has served as editor of 2 academic journals and is the president of the National Communication Association, as well as the president of the Council of Communication Associations. He has also served on the board of directors of the International Customer Service Association and the International Communication Association. So you think, what a tireless scholar he must be. And you would be right, except for the tireless work he does also for corporations. He has worked with more than 300 companies and public agencies worldwide on all topics related to communication, influence, and customer loyalty. He has worked with American Airlines, EDS, IBM, Trammell Crow, Marriott, Roche, Merck, TI, Merrill Lynch, USAA, and many government entities, as well as the Department of the Army, the Department of Veteran Affairs, and the Department of the Interior, just to name a few. Holy cow. He is known for good reason as an expert in communication effectiveness, customer service and loyalty, advocacy, persuasion and influence, presentation skills, leadership and teamwork, and crisis communication. And through my own experience, I can tell you he's one of the best damn teachers that I have ever personally experienced. So it is my pleasure and honor to be able to introduce John Daly to you and turn it over.
All right. Thank you so much. Never clap ahead of time. What if I'm bad? How do you take it back? My name is John Daly. I do teach at UT Austin. I teach a couple undergraduate classes. One is a class this semester of 520 kids called interpersonal communication. I find it an odd oxymoron, all right? I also teach in the Archer program in Washington, D.C. In fact, this weekend I'll be flying up to teach the final class there. The Archer, as you know, is a program UT System has, where students can spend a semester working in D.C., in the White House, on Capitol Hill, newspaper, and at the same time get credit, all right, for all their classes. Some UTSA people, some of our best students actually come from UTSA. In the business school, I teach a couple MBA classes during this year. One is called advocacy, which is probably my dearest love. It's how you successfully sell ideas within organizations. How many recognize on a campus like UTSA, there's a politics to ideas? Some ideas go far, some don't, and the reason why is not because of the quality. Indeed, some really good ideas go nowhere, and some really bad ideas go far. So I've been interested in years about what it takes to successfully get buy-in for your ideas within organizations. The other class I teach is something called Leadership Challenges. In that class, I'm interested in one very simple, I think, important question. How come some people are more successful than other people within organizations? How come some people skyrocket to the top and other people get stuck in the middle? Let's be clear, not everyone wants to succeed. Some people simply want a job to be able to afford to live. But some people want to climb the proverbial ladder of success. There is no ladder, by the way. It's a very greasy pole. My methodology is very simple. I go to successful people and say, how come you're here? How come you're here and not somebody else? Now, some will say they're here because their mother created the company. Fair and legitimate answer. Some will say no one else wanted this job. Somebody has to simply step up and take responsibility. I mean, they go push it, because I don't believe anyone turns down $30 million in Gulfstream Stream 6. Most look out the windows. They have windows, all of them, by the way. And they say something like this: I had extraordinary vision. I can never help but ask at that moment, which drug? I had some good visions in college, I really did. But I want the CEO of USA to come in every morning. I had a vision last night. A few days in, it began to creep me out. So they begin to tell you really interesting things that when you hear them, you go, of course, but I'm not sure they come up. For example, never take a job with a guy before he's done great. Follow a loser. Seriously, poor Tim Cook at Apple. How do you follow Steve Jobs? Who's my soccer fans here? Any soccer fans here? Why would you follow Moynes? Why would Moynes follow Ferguson? It makes no sense, right? He lasted, what, 6 months at most? Hopefully they paid him a lot of money. Okay, good. All right. Another one, perhaps the most important one these guys tell us that I think us in university environments are not good at. They say the single biggest mistake most of us make is we talk ourselves out of opportunities. What's that mean? Who would like to buy a nice car if money were no issue whatsoever? What kind of car would it be? What kind? Aspirational. Go for it. Mercedes. How much does the best Mercedes in the world cost? Somebody, give me a rounding or a number. 170, how many? 175,000? Very specific number. I'm impressed. All right. You know, UTSA has a great year, just a fantastic year. And Ricardo decides to do something very unusual at universities, give everyone huge bonuses. Your bonus is $150,000 in cash in a paper bag. You're driving home tonight, you go right by your local Mercedes dealership in your neighborhood, you see the car of your dream with 175 soaked on the window. What's the mistake you make? You keep driving. Most of us keep driving. What do every one of these successful people say you have to do every time? Walk in with your paper sack of money. I got $150,000. Do you agree with the car for that amount of money? Now, in truth, most of them laugh and kick you out. But who knows? They haven't sold a car for the last 2 weeks. There's weird sales competition going on. Look, I can 100% guarantee you won't get the car if you don't go in. At least a small chance of getting the car if you walk in. Who's happily married here? You used to know. Embrace it. All right? If you don't ask, it's not going to happen. So for my MBA class, I have them do an odd assignment. They're liking it now. They hate it for the first 6 weeks. It's called the ask assignment. I say once a week, you got to ask for something you're absolutely sure you're not going to get. Ask for an upgrade on an airplane. Ask for a better room in a hotel. Who's worked retail? Ask for a discount. Now, I was in a movie theater a couple weeks ago. They gave me a box of popcorn, expensive but small. So I tell the woman, can I get a bigger box? I got no more money with me. She says, sure. She doesn't care that much, right? If you don't ask, it's not going to happen. I tell undergraduates, always ask for a better grade when they're borderline. How many that's wise? How many, it drives you crazy, but how many think it's wise? Look, how many of you, just between us, the doors are closed, all right? How many of you don't care that much, okay? What the hell? Okay, 1 point doesn't matter that much, all right? You got to go on vacation. What happens is this. If you don't ask, it's not going to happen. Teachers can't read your mind. The mistake we make is we're afraid to ask, and we shouldn't do this. Now, some of these behaviors are a very different class of behaviors. In the writing we're doing now, we're calling them asymmetric behaviors. Do them right, no one knows them. Do them wrong, they become dramas. So we meet for the first time. What do we say? Nice to what?
Meet you.
Never again as long as you live. How could you forget me? I thought we had this great relationship. Who's made the mistake of saying, nice to meet you, and somebody says, don't you remember? Went to school together, hooked up last weekend. It comes back to haunt you, doesn't it? What do you want to say instead? Nice to see you. Good to see you. How are you doing? Look, every teacher who's taught for a while recognizes the problem. Everyone remembers you, but you can't remember everyone. Nice to meet you is going to create a drama you don't really need to have. Nice to see you is just as safe and runs no risk of embarrassing anyone. What's another example? I got all these. Let's think of another one. Who's married? Wife's name is? Janine. Your name is? Jonathan. How does she walk? How are you doing? Great. How's Janine? She left me for Jonathan. It's not that funny, all right? Understand, I don't really care, but now I got to act like I care for the next 20 minutes. Sit down, sigh, tell you what a scum he is, okay? Buy a cup of coffee, check with him around. I don't even care. But I asked the wrong question. You never ask about relationships or jobs when you haven't seen somebody for a while. What do you say instead? What's new in your world? What's up? It works just as well. Let them choose anything they want to talk about. Asymmetric. Do it right, no one knows this. Do them wrong becomes a problem. One that we've discovered recently, and undergraduates do this a lot, and some of us do this also. You work on something really important for your department. You spend weeks in meetings and so on that. You finally draft the proposal up. You give it to the department chair or the dean, and what happens? She says, great job. Thanks so much. What's the mistake lots of people make? They say, no problem, no worries. That's just stupid. It was a problem. You had no life for the last 6 weeks. When somebody says, great job, what should you say instead? Thank you. Well, you're welcome. Never dismiss your own work. It's asymmetric. Saying thank you is fine, isn't it? No problem dismissing your own work. So I have a large cluster of these things we're working on now. And I find it really interesting research. But when it comes to communication, especially in the classroom, it's something I've wondered about a lot for a long time. What makes some teachers more effective communicating in the classroom than other teachers do? And I think we figured out a couple things in the research a long time ago, and some more stuff more recently. So what I'm going to do today is just give you maybe 7 or 8 observations we've discovered about what makes people more effective in the classroom as a communicator, and also more effective on a campus as a campus politician. And understand, any great teacher has to be a good campus politician. I think I'm right about that. You got to get the right times, right equipment. You've got to be able to do that sort of thing. Number one, and perhaps the single most vital thing we've discovered, is this. Every great leader, every great teacher has one thing in common. They're all extraordinarily good storytellers. You'll never find a great leader, a great teacher, who is not an incredible storyteller. How many of them are right about that? I don't want to step on anyone's face here. Who had a great history class in school? Who had a great history class in school? Filled with stories. Who had a god of history class? Names and dates. The difference in any field is the stories. Great science teachers are actually great storytellers. Great English teachers are great storytellers. The book itself is part of it, but the story that wraps around is what intrigues people over a period of time. Why is that so important? Because we are our stories. All of you have families. What is a family? It's nothing more and certainly nothing less than a collection of stories. Ever thought about this? Your inheritance to your children won't be money or land you work for your tea. But even if you become the wealthiest person in America, the real gift you give your kids is a collection of stories. Who does family reunions? Storytelling sessions. Half the stories even true, but over 5 generations they became true. Who has a much older or younger sibling? Who has a much older or younger sibling? Any of you in that situation? How far apart? Older or younger than you? He or he, say he. Is he a brother or more like a weird nephew or a cousin? All that. It's not a brother though, right? The biology may be identical. The geography maybe is the same. The difference is the stories. You know what? By the time you was old enough to go to Disney, you had no desire to go, plus you couldn't fit in the teacups. All right? You remember your father having energy. He has absolutely no recall of this. He says, Dad wrestled with you every day. Every day you say, he came home, I jumped him, still have a scar on my arm from that. He goes, when I was a kid, he just sat on the couch using his remote. And you come back and say, in my day, I was the remote. By the way, college kids don't get that joke. All right. You have 2 sets of stories. Even though the family is identical in the things we normally consider family to be, the stories are completely different, aren't they? Stories define organizations too. You don't belong to an organization until you actually know the stories. When you join an academic department, your first year here, everyone goes out at lunch one day. People say, do you remember this happened? Everyone laughs uproariously except for you. You go, he, because you know they're talking about. Stories define us. But stories do more than that. People get it when you tell a story. People get it when you tell a story. Who's been married for more than like 6 months' time? How many figure you and your partner get the same fights for the next 50 years? You give a number the topic. It's topic number 3. He'll sulk for 3 days, then it'll be fine. If you want your partner to understand why something matters so much, tell a story. Let me tell you what happened to me when I was a kid, so to speak. Stories help people understand what's important. I'll give you a personal one. I grew up in Europe till I was almost 10 years old. Moved back to the Washington, D.C. area. My father had a very tough and demanding job, but he made it a point to come out every night to basically take a walk with me. Walk always ended up at Baskin-Robbins. Exercise was hefting 2 scoops, I'm convinced. Next to the Baskin-Robbins was a place that kept changing ownership. It quickly became a restaurant called the Wild Onion Restaurant. Now, I'll never forget the name Wild Onion Restaurant because the age of 9, I was sure it was the single stupidest name for a restaurant you could ever come up with. Why? My mother had to cook with onions, and my chore at home was to peel and chop onions. Who's ever peeled and chopped an onion in your life? It's miserable. I made these jokes. People would be crying when they leave here, Dad. Smell the air. Pee you. It's disgusting. We had so much fun doing these stories every night, this joke every night. A year later, we go on holiday for a few weeks. We come back, we take a walk as we always do. I get my ice cream. I walk over to the restaurant. I see this giant white sign in front of it. Says they're bankrupt. They're out of business. I say, Dad, come look. He says, what is it? The place is closed. The street is dry. The air smells so good. He laughs with me, but as we're walking home, he says, John, you probably ought not to laugh at that. And I probably said, why, in a very snotty 10-year-old voice. Do you know what bankruptcy means? I said, yeah, it means they have no money. He says, yeah, but it means more than that. And I probably said, what? It probably means, he says, a couple, maybe a single person, saved up their money for 10 or 15 or 20 years. They go on holiday like we did for the last couple weeks. They saved up the money. They buy the kids nice clothes like you have now. They saved up their money. And last year when they opened this restaurant up was probably the single proudest moment of life. Table costs perfectly blessed, crystal perfectly clear. They beamed and said everything they ever wanted had come true. And now every one of those dreams is absolutely gone and shattered. What's funny about that? I'll tell you something that drives my friends and my family absolutely nuts, and that's this. When I travel, I never like to go to chain restaurants. I love mom and pop places. I think you generally get better food. Sometimes you get sick, I gotta admit, but generally you get better food. I think you're supporting something called hope and entrepreneurship. So if you're out traveling one day, there's a Denny's and an IHOP or Panera's on the side, little mom and pop place over here. Do I turn in there? Of course I turn in there. And you kind of understand why, much better than a slide, core belief, entrepreneurship. If you want people to get something, you got to tell a story. Now, here's the astounding thing. Every language around the world has a slightly different grammar. Sometimes major differences, sometimes limited differences. But the grammar of stories around the world is virtually identical. It explains why Disney works so well when you think about it, right? Let's understand the grammar. Who's seen Finding Nemo? Everyone's seen Finding Nemo. Okay. Well, it's the setting. Under the sea in the Pacific and Australia, or Sydney, right? Main characters, Nemo. What's the ditzy fish's name? Dory. Bonus point, Dad's name? Very good. I know what your kids are, okay? Okay, it's a Disney movie. Mom gets killed in some horrible way right at the beginning. Something bad happened to Walt's family. He does not like mothers. You ever notice this? They never survive. If there's any mothers, evil stepmothers. Something creepy happened. All right? Now, they have goals. What's Dad's goal? To find Nemo. Nemo's goal is to get out, right? Obstacles. The shark. The dentist kid. Resolution. Nemo gets flushed. Lessons learned. Every story follows that very simple structure. Character, setting, goals, obstacles, conflict, resolution. So every novel you read has that structure. Every TV show has that structure. Every comedy show even has that structure on TV. That's what takes to tell a story. So what are specific moves we discovered that really good storytellers have? What do they do to tell a good story? Number one, it's short. How many people tell stories that are going for too damn long? Number two, has to have a point to it. How many people tell stories you cannot figure out the point of the story is? It's a joke without a punchline. All right, who's been sober around a group of drunk people? It's the first two issues. They're going relentlessly and there's no point to what they're talking about. Number three, it's got to have some suspense attached to it. Now, I'm going to give a trade secret out. I don't think there's any non-teachers here. We live in the perfect Peter Pan world. We keep getting older, everyone else stays about the same age. Which means you don't need that many stories, actually, right? You can use the same ones every semester. I could survive off like 12 stories my entire life, all right? Poor people in the working world got to keep coming up with new ones. How do you do that? All right? What happens is when people have heard a story once or twice, they get kind of bored with it, don't they? So you got to find new ones. Let's suppose you say, how do I find new ones? There are a number of ways to discover stories we've discovered in the research. One is this. Think of any value you have. Anything you hold of value for, there's a story. Who believes in honesty? Either A, because you're a pathological liar in high school, or B, you once saw honesty or dishonesty happen, you saw the consequences, good or bad. There's your story right there. So how do these really fancy people always seem to have the right story at the right moment? They're coming in to talk to us in a little while. They're running incredibly late. They sit in the back of the room. They only have 2 minutes before they be introduced. They say to themselves, what value do I want to communicate today? Honesty, trust, loyalty, creativity, innovation. They figure one of these values and said, when did I learn that was so important? Thus, they have their story, don't they? Now, some of you say, I have no values. What do I do then? One technique, just start using the phrase, for example. Every time you say, for example, what are you forced to do? Come up with a story, don't you? You got to come up with a story. All right? Who's my science people here? Who discovered penicillin? Oh, Fleming, right? Great story, by the way, isn't it? He was a slob. Gives some of us hope, right? August, he goes on vacation from St. Mary's in London. Comes back, It's a messy place already. His lab dishes are there. Fungi and bacteria don't want to be next to each other. That's the discovery. That's only part of the story, though. Fleming found it was an interesting medical kind of thing, curious thing, right? Pharmaceutical thing. But he didn't know what to do with it. A guy named Max Florey spent 15 years doing bench science after that, if you recollect. Florey and Fleming shared the Nobel Prize. No one remembers Florey, ever remembers Fleming, don't they? So you're constantly looking for these stories anytime you read anything. What can I learn from these things? So bench science isn't that interesting compared to discovery. But Florey could have made a story up, but he didn't. If you read any great science, there's a story because of suspense involved. So you can start using, for example, in any academic field, and you can come up with certain things. Who does innovation stuff here? For example, I'll give you a couple examples. How was Velcro discovered? No, it wasn't NASA. That was Tang. All right. No. Actually, a guy in Switzerland climbing mountains. Millions of people have done this before. He was the first guy to sit down, pull the burrs off his leg, off his socks, and look through a microscope. Millions of people have taken burrs off their socks before. No one looked at a microscope before. How was Scotch discovered? The only female member of the chemistry unit at 3M for the first 75 years of its company's existence, working in a lab one day, spills some chemical on the floor she's working on, cleans it up immediately, walks at home afterwards in St. Paul on a sleety, snowy day, gets home, takes off her shoes, and notices something really weird. One sock is dry and the other sock is wet. Can't figure out why, no big deal. 3 o'clock in the morning, she wakes up and it occurs to her she had spilled the chemical on one shoe and not on the other. There's another example. So you start saying, for example, in any area of research you have, there's an example you could draw in a story. Some of you say, I can't tell examples. What's another one? Think of what really bugs you. Think of things that really annoy you. Who hates bad customer service? There's a story there. Rental car company, airline, hotel, university screwed you over. You got a story. Some of you say, I can't do that. Nothing pisses me off, but I got no examples either. Think how things in your life has changed. Think how your view of things have changed. All of us are more sure of some things and less sure of other things as we get older. So anytime your view of something has changed, there's a story behind it. Who did go to UT Austin for college? Have you go to UT Austin? Wait, you went to UT Austin. Where'd you grow up, by the way? San Antonio. There's a reputation at UT. You come to UT Austin, you become too liberal. Who's heard that before? We don't make people liberal. We make them apathetic. That's what we're good at. No. When you were in high school, you hated these goth people on the streets. They really disturbed you. You arrive at UT. I looked at your record before this program, all right? What happens? You open your dorm room the first day. Who's your new roommate? A goth person. Mommy, get me out of here. No roommate, you're stuck with this person for a semester. I think it was October 13th, and October 14th. You were laying in your bunk, half hungover. Roommate was snoring above you. And it suddenly occurs to you, you and she have a lot more in common than you thought you did. Both of you felt in chemistry, you never felt anything before. Both your boyfriends have texted you to dump you over the last 2 weeks. All right? Both of your mothers are asking idiotic questions on the phone. Are you eating right? Yes, Mom. Generally speaking, the fork makes it accurately into the mouth. I don't miss very often. Now, you're back at home a week later in San Antonio. You're driving someplace. There's a goth guy on the street. What happens? Your dad makes some snide comment. That's whatever. And you go, Dad, give the kid a break. Just because they dress different doesn't mean they're weird people. Your dad goes, oh, my God, 6 weeks of UT, you're a liberal already. You're not a liberal. You just don't care anymore. By the way, just tell you a story. Anytime your view of anything changes, there's probably a story behind it. I urge all of you to become story collectors. I urge all of you to become story collectors. Trust me, the data, I think, is profoundly clear. When somebody reads something narratively, they listen differently than they will listen to PowerPoints. Indeed, we know there are really two ways of communicating. Basically, bullets, list structure, and narrative structure. And what I urge you to do is take that list structure, at least for every so often, have a little story. Now, some of you say, look, I have no personality. I can't tell stories. Okay? I know what we'll name the academic degree. Okay? If you can't tell stories, collect interesting factoids instead. Little factoids have exactly the same impact as good stories do. Who's taken a tour of a park or museum? What do you remember? The stories and the factoids. You go, that is so interesting. Some of the best teachers I've ever seen in action have this incredible ability to just throw away factoids every so often. And people walk out of the class and say, that's so interesting. I never knew that before. That makes the class interesting, doesn't it? It's not a story, it's a factoid. So how do you find factoids? Again, just curiosity. Every time you read, circle and write down factoids you find interesting. Or collect them elsewhere too. What's an example? Who has to make presentations sometimes? Here's an old speechwriter's trick. You're going to make a presentation tomorrow. Go to the web tonight and find out historic things that happened tomorrow throughout history. Find one that's relevant and just toss it out. People go, my God, he's so smart. He knows this. No, you looked up on the web. You can find factoids in your disciplines as well. So I'm lucky enough to work at a healthcare organization in California, do a lot of work there for the last 15 years or so. The person who brings me in actually runs most of the research labs and actually ended up being head of it for a while. She's now retiring this week, in fact. All right? Brilliant person. Originally a dermatologist, went back to school to become a plastic surgeon. Trained in San Antonio, working with burn victims. Grafting skin, that's her specialty. As she likes to say, I burned out very quickly on doing that, went into administration instead. Now what she does is interesting. When she has issues in her organization, she doesn't actually hire consulting companies. She hires professionals like us. She brings us in for these things. Finance issues, some from INSEAD, somebody from Columbia, some from NYU, Chicago. People sort of think I'm lucky enough to be one of the people she brings in sometimes. I'm in California a couple years ago talking to her. I say, why do you choose us? And this is a big change initiative she's doing. McKinsey's expensive, but they're really worth it. Accenture has this huge change management practice. Why do you choose us instead? John, what did I do before I became a hospital administrator? You're a doc. What kind? You grafted skin. She says, it's brilliant, you remember. One thing I learned early in my training at Brook was this. Taking the skin off your leg, applying your arm, it will take in a whole bunch of cases. Taking the skin off your leg and applying my arm, it will get rejected in the majority of cases. And if it doesn't get rejected, you'll be taking anti-rejection drugs for the rest of your life. I could bring McKinsey in, I could bring Accenture, and they do a fine job. But by having you guys facilitate our own groups to do it, we own it. She could have said organic growth works better, but how many of that factoid of skin grafting sticks in my mind to this day? Stories and factoids work brilliantly to be more intriguing to people. Second characteristic, I think people who are really good communicators exude a deep sense of fairness. Fairness matters. That's been my experience with teaching for a number of years. Everyone says it's not fair. Now, if you know a history of fairness, you can look at four different stages of fairness we've gone through. From basically early times until about 1960, fairness was defined in a very simple world. Outcome fairness is what people called it sometimes. It was a ratio between what I put in and what I got out. If I put 100, I should get 100 out. Indeed, if I get more out, I feel guilty. If I get less out, I feel angry. Two psychologists, one at Wisconsin, one at Madison, said something many years ago. They said, that actually isn't fairness. So they came up with a concept my psychologists will know called equity theory. Equity says this, I compare how I'm treated to somebody else. So I put in 100, I get out 100, I should be happy, right? Actually, I'm happy until I found out you put in 100 and got 300. Then I'm angry. People always compare. Who had brothers or sisters? How many of you know you were not the favorite child? It's a comparison thing, right? It's a comparison. That's what we do. We compare. Now, the problem is this in academics. Oftentimes we can't talk about how another student is treated. And secondly, oftentimes people are comparing themselves to a hypothetical other. I know you get better grades than other people. So we're stuck until the 1980s, 1970s, when a group of psychologists led by a guy named Joel Brockner, who's done for Columbia, did an interesting project. Went to a small town in West Virginia. Anybody know where Weirton, West Virginia is? I doubt you would. Panhandle, West Virginia, about 50 miles west of Pittsburgh. It was a steel town in those days. It was a small steel town. The entire town ran around the steel industry. National Steel had been there for almost 100 years. It was a generational job. Drop out of school at age 16, start as a sweeper. By the time you're 37 years old, you have a Winnebago and a house. They were great jobs. Refinery jobs in Texas today, for example, equivalent. What happened was the steel industry started collapsing. National Steel, which owned the steel company there, said we're going to close it down. The employees said, you can't do it. It's our company. We've lived here for many years. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, me, my son is working here. You can't do this. We can't make any money on it, the company said. So they ended up agreeing to do the single largest ESOP in American history by that point in time, employee stock ownership plan. The company sold the mill to the employees for $1 plus environmental costs. In the process of selling it, they had to basically lay off about 2/3 of the workforce. Now, this is bad because you're too old to start over again. You're going from Winnebago to Wendy's and Walmart for the rest of your life. So Proctor was interested in how do people feel about this. Worried, anxious, concerned, mystified in many cases, because these were generational jobs. But not one of the people interviewed said it was unfair. Why was it not unfair? No, everyone's screwed. You're going from Wendy's or Winnebago to Wendy's. You're not coming back again. Maybe Walmart's your exciting opportunity other than Wendy's. No, actually, individually, it wasn't a choice. Yeah.
You got to put the ball in their court, giving them the opportunity to regrow the business.
Yeah.
Kind of, but not really. Who's worked union jobs? Anybody worked a union job? How do unions generally lay off people? Seniority. First in, last out, last in, first out. Oddly enough, it wasn't unfair at all. The father kept the job, the son lost the job. The father had 40 years in, the son only had 15 years in. It wasn't unfair because the ground rules later on seniority, turns, shifts, everything was based upon seniority. After September 11th, there were no young flight attendants. Everyone got laid off almost immediately after September 11th. A friend of ours back at the University of Texas, his wife was one of those senior flight attendants at United Airlines for a number of years. 6 times a month, she flew from Chicago or New York to Buenos Aires, which is the single best flight you can have as a flight attendant in the Western Hemisphere. It's Frankfurt to Cape Town or Johannesburg. What's the value of that? You sleep all the time, right? You go overnight, basically you put people to bed, they go to sleep, they wake up, you feed them again, you're done. You have to have 35 hours of crew rest in Buenos Aires before you come back again. Not a bad deal. The flight attendants would fly from Dallas to San Antonio every day, 7 times a day. Either the most senior people, okay, because they want to be home at night, or the youngest people that don't get much money for that flight, but they get stuck with it. Proctor's observation was profound. If people believe the procedures are fair, they can handle any outcome. They can handle any outcome, even when the outcome is not to their advantage. What's this mean for me as a teacher, at least? I am absolutely great at procedural fairness. I have so many different ways people can get a good grade that when they complain they can't, I say, we gave you this attempt, we gave you this try, we gave you this try, we gave you this try. And everyone walks out and say, yeah, you tried hard, I appreciate it. Who's given a bad grade? A student's come in and complain, and by the time they leave, they feel like, oh, you tried so hard. Procedural fairness works. So when you evaluate essays, for example, we used to have something called holistic evaluation. I'm not sure if it's still around. But you have analytical evaluations too. If you have 9 or 10 different categories, if you simply give a 9 or 8 in every one of those categories, guess what? They end up with a B or C. But it's procedurally fair. Procedural fairness works. Who has kids? I have kids too. I first read this research, I tried it with my 2 older kids. Some amusement park came to town one day. Let's go. Off we went. We did about 6 rides. I said, time to come home. No, Dad, can't we stay? I want to stay. Please not stay longer. Please, please, please. I said, no, we got to go. Please, I hate you. Who's done this speech before? Never again, I said. Never again. Well, amusement parks, read Proctor's research a few months later when it first came out. Amusement park came back to town after reading that research. My kids are like lab rats to me. I like fooling with them that way sometimes, try things out. So I said, the amusement park's back in town. You want to go? Yeah, can we go right now? I said, no, we're first going to decide on the number of rides we're going to take. They said, well, how many do you want to take? I said, you guys decide. Ownership, right? Well, they said, how about 3 apiece like we did last time? So we'll do 6 rides, then we come home. Yeah, I want you to say both together. We'll do 6 rides, then come home. We'll do 6 rides, we come home. Say it with feeling. We'll do 6 rides, then we come home. Say it with power. We'll do 6 rides, then we come home. Got in the car. I wouldn't start the car up. I said, how many rides? 6. Then we're going to do, come home. Off we drove. Now I had one of these torture cars, all right? That is, the rear windows wouldn't go down, the rear doors wouldn't open unless I released some latches. So they're sitting there at the amusement park, looking at the Ferris wheel with the nose pressed against the window. Can I go? Can we go? Not till you say one more time what the deal is. 6 rides, then we come home. Off we went. We did have 6 rides. I said, time to come home. No, we're coming. Bogus research. I said, well, didn't we agree before we left the house that we do 6 rides, then we come home? They said, sure. Were they happy? No. Could they live with it? Absolutely. Procedural fairness conquers any other kind of fairness. If people believe the process is fair, they can live with any outcome. The third observation about communicating in the classroom is a really interesting one to me. You need to become more attentive and responsive. Good communicators exude attentiveness and responsiveness. Attentiveness, minimally acting like you're paying attention. Minimally acting like you're paying attention. How many of you like it when people pay attention? Better yet, what do you really care about? They act like they're listening or they're really listening. Let's be honest. What do you really care about? Acting like you're listening. Who's got in trouble before him? Your partner says you're not listening. You repeat word for word what they said. They said, no, I want you to act like you're paying attention. Minimally, you got to act like you're paying attention. What's a trick? A president of a university I've done some work with the last couple weeks, months, has an interesting habit. He always has his cell phone on the desk. You come in his office, sit down, he always takes his cell phone off his desk and puts it in a desk drawer automatically. Now, he can still hear it ring, he can hear it buzz if he wants, right? He has 5 admins who can tell him somebody's calling, but symbolic of what it's saying. I'm paying attention. You matter more than anyone else. It's symbolic, but it's real in some cases. What we understand is being attentive. The metaphor I like to use is imagine you're teaching a class, imagine you're talking to a student, there are 2 spotlights. One spotlight's on you, one spotlight's on them, but only one at a time can go on. Measure the amount of time the spotlight's on the other person. That's what we like. We like people to pay attention to us. But even more important than paying attention is trying to understand. Understanding doesn't mean you agree, but you can understand. Who had good parents when you were raised? Who had good parents when you were raised? They always agree with you? No, that'd be a bad movie, The Agreeable Parent. What did you hope they could do? Understand. Get it. If your parents don't get it, you're not happy. They may listen to you. They may say, I understand really, but no, they don't get it. Getting is what people want. Now, how do we demonstrate this kind of getting? Couple principles to think about. Number 1, people don't say or do things they know to be stupid. Okay, I'm going to give you, you know this. Maybe 1 or 2 students here. I'm going to give you a trade secret today about teachers. Who remembers saying to your class, there's no such thing as a stupid question? Trust me, there are truly stupid questions. But no one asks a question that would be stupid, right? In their minds, they have a good reason to ask that question. So what you've got to do, it seems to me, if you're going to be a good communicator, is act like the question is important if it's not. Every CEO knows the principle. Only act surprised when you're not surprised. Only act surprised when you're not surprised. When you're totally surprised, treat it like it's the most normal thing in the world. When you're totally familiar, act like it's the most unusual thing in the world. Doctors know the same thing in emergency departments. What happens? They roll a patient in. Doctors go, oh my God, that's disgusting. It's supposed to get horrible. They go, we deal with this all the time. On the other hand, somebody comes in with the flu, they go, this is horrible. No one's had a worse flu than you have. You only act surprised, you're not surprised. So when a student asks you a question, you got to assume they have a good reason for asking that question. They're not going to ask a question that will be stupid. It may, in the end, be really stupid, but no one's going to ask a question they know is not stupid. That'd be really perverse. No one's going to do something that's not they think is stupid. They have good reasons. All of you are teenagers once. How many of you count yourself lucky to be alive based upon your teenage years? No, everything you did that was stupid, you had a good reason in that moment to do. Or your friends were doing it. You're so pissed at your parents. You didn't understand gravity or inertial force. You had good reasons. People don't do stupid things they know to be stupid. In their minds, they have a good reason for doing it. Now, afterwards, they say that's really dumb. But no one does something they know to be wrong. So you've got to, when talking about understanding, recognize people in their minds have good reasons. I teach college. You teach college. I was once in college too. All of you went to college, right? How many of you are able to reflect back to your college years and say, I got to give this kid a break because I've done exactly the same stupid thing? I deal with hungover kids on a regular basis, right? I've been hungover. Do you want to be in a lecture? No. If you're throwing up, leave the room. I've been there myself. Who shares those kind of experiences? Okay? I had to raise kids when I was in college briefly, all right? Understand, kids get sick, don't they? Understand, some people have some give, some people don't have a give, based upon understanding. Understanding is very difficult sometimes. So it's interesting. Your campus is a wonderful for a number of reasons, okay? But how many of you, how many think some of your students have never gone to college before? None of their families gone to college before they come to your class. That's an interesting dynamic. Here's the challenge for those kids. Their parents don't get what they're going through. Who at least one parent did not go through college? Who at least one parent? Yeah, it wasn't about love. They couldn't get it sometimes, right? You should be studying on Friday night. No, actually, we party on Friday night. You don't understand. We're paying all this money. You're not studying. You got to rest sometimes. One parent went to college, says, give the kid a break. The parent doesn't go to college, says, I'm a problem. Who's not U.S. by background? Who's not U.S. by background? And you have kids. What will drive your kids crazy is you can't get the U.S. completely. Cultures form in the first 15 years in the playground. Your kids will translate from you. Where are you from? Germany. Yeah. Okay, very good. All right. What age are your children? How old is your child? 3 and 0. Yeah, 3 and 0. They're more than 0, by the way. They're above 0, trust me. All right. But understand, your 3-year-old, 10 years from now, the biggest complaint they'll have is you don't get it, Dad. You say, no, I was a boy once. I remember being a boy. Not in San Antonio. That's different. It's not about agreement. It's not about love. It's about understanding. Second thing about understanding. A wonderful area of research called secret tests. I love this research. All right? All of us have department chairs, bosses. Who thinks your department chair, your boss, whatever, likes you or respects you? Only one person in the room. Is so sad. No, 2 people. Okay, we've doubled the number already. Okay, increase the level by 50%. How do you know? You don't. But you have what we call secret tests to see if they like and respect you. Do they leave you alone, right? That's a test. How many think that's a great test? That's my test. Leave me alone. Don't bug me is a good test, right? How many love that test? Who actually likes the gossip? Who wants to go to lunch with your chair or whatever every day, sort of thing, be around all the time? Some people actually love that. Some people want challenging assignments. Some people want easy assignments. We all engage in tests. Now, I don't know where this research really comes from. It probably wasn't researched historically. But I can tell you some companies who claim they have these tests. Who wants to get rich someday when you leave the university? One person. What's your background? I'm in real estate. Real estate, very good. J.C. Penney's needs a chief real estate officer. Headquartered now in Dallas, but this is when they're in New York City. It's a great job. 7-figure income. You have multiple commas behind your name. Interested in it so far? Only have to work 3 days a month, you get your own private plane. Still interested? It's getting better by the moment, isn't it? Okay, you get the J.C. Penney's discount, which I'm sure seals the deal for you. All right. Now, they fly to New York. It's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful interview. Smooth as butter. Best interview you've ever done in your entire life. At 5 o'clock, they said, let's meet at the Ricardo restaurant. The Ricardo restaurant, new place opened up just a few months ago. Let's meet at 8 o'clock. You arrive at 8 o'clock. Everyone's already there sipping a glass of wine. You're not late, but they're there early, it seems. You come in, you're from Texas, you order a cold beer. Everyone gets a second glass of wine, you order a second beer, and you tear the paper label as you're talking, you're from Texas. All right? Everyone sits down to order food. They order fufu veggie plates. You order chicken fried steak with French fries and mashed potatoes with gravy and everything. An absolutely beige meal. All right? 20 minutes later, the food arrives. Within a couple minutes of the food arriving, they make a decision whether they want to hire you or not. And you know what their test was? Not fitting in, no. Whether you season your food before or after tasting it. They never hired anyone who automatically seasons their food. You know, it's Ricardo's sodium chloride restaurant. He dips everything in a vat of salt before he serves it to you. How many understand they said we want people to take a data? I'm not claiming this is an empirically valid test in any way, matter, or form. But it was their corporate test, wasn't it? Everyone has tests. If you pass them, you know. If you fail, you don't know. But they make a decision anyway, don't they? So when we're saying you want to be responsive, you need to try to figure out people's tests. You need to figure out people's responses. Who's dealt with graduate students? They have different tests than undergraduates sometimes. How many think about this? Freshmen have different tests. You got to adapt. If you're happily married, you're still testing your spouse no matter how long you've been married. Does he remember the kind of color coffee you like? The yellow bag or the blue bag or the pink one, right? Sugar fainter? You test them. Do they simply get it without even asking? That's a test. Amazing, if you fail a test, you won't really know it. But people just not put you as part of the team any longer in some ways. A lot of the research I do revolves around this informally. How's that work? I'm finally interested in what makes people successful. So I've interviewed a lot of really successful people, and I've asked them this question. One guy I talked to one time was a guy named Stan O'Neill. Ever heard of Stan O'Neill? Stan O'Neill is one of the more amazing characters in modern financial history. He ran Merrill Lynch for a couple years. He has no high school degree. He has a GED. He's the last non-high school person to ever run a major company, probably, all right? His father was a sharecropper in Alabama, lost the farm age at 12, moved to Atlanta, worked in a General Motors plant. Stan dropped out of school at 16, working in a General Motors plant. Stan starts working there. Somebody takes a liking to him and says, Stan, you're smart. Yeah, okay. No, you should go to college. I don't have a high school degree. Get a GED, I'll get you into college. He did. General Motors had their own university for many years called GMI, now called Kettering Institute. They got him in. He did what he famously called the 6 and 6. 6 weeks up there, 6 weeks in Atlanta, double shift back again. Graduates with a 4.0 in finance, starts at GMAC. Ends up running Merrill Lynch. We're talking about this at a fancy lunch one day. And I'm talking, he says, John, what you're studying now is the single deepest form of discrimination we have in this country today. There's racial, there's gender, there's ethnic, there's height, there's weight. And you can discriminate anything you want. So what do you mean? He says, no, what you're dealing with is probably the single most important thing university professors can deal with. So what do you mean? He thinks of him and says, you know what the D&B rule is? Dun & Bradstreet? No. BMW, the car company? No. How do you know which is your bread plate? How do you know which is your glass of water at this table? Glass of water's here, bread's over here. How do you know that? So I just know. He says, no, you don't just know. Okay, I bet your mother taught you when you're young to set the table, right? I guess so. What if the living room is the bedroom, is the dining room in a shotgun kind of house with only 3 or 4 rooms? That's how I grew up. I get to GM, guess what? GMI or other? I have a big banquet the first day, I choose the wrong glass of water. No one says anything, but I know I don't fit in. He says, that's discrimination. It's economic discrimination in many ways, right? Not knowing people's tests, not passing their tests. Walking out of that place, he says, John, you go to weddings? I said, I'm a professor, I go to hundreds of weddings, I think. He says, you can always tell a wedding, any guy who's never worn a tie before. I mean, I'm right about that, you can tell. What happens, what? You're having a really important party afterwards, who you're not going to invite. It's a simple test, right? You fail these tests, you don't get included. Really interesting, the notion of secret tests. 4th characteristic, leaders, teachers are very good at making people want to be around them. Students vote with their feet, it seems to me. Students vote with their feet. So what do we understand? You've got to make people want to be around you. Now, what we've done in our research for a number of years now is gone to very successful people and said, as I said, what are your secrets? How do you create loyalty, for example, ask? How do you make people want to follow you, want to listen to you over a period of time? And we found a number of things. Let me give you a few things we discovered about how these guys are really good at creating loyalty. Number 1, they recognize people in unexpected places. Who's had a school teacher recognize you many years later in a shopping mall? Who's had that experience? Look at you, all grown up, not in jail. Astounding. We like it when people recognize us. By the way, don't recognize people in places neither one of you is supposed to be at. All right? It's useful information, useful information. Secondly, show up for things that matter to people even though they don't matter to you. Just show up for things. My parents in here, you know what I'm talking about. You've been to more school plays and soccer terms than you ever want to go to in your entire life. And when you show up, your kids diss you, don't they? They see you standing up here, you try to take a picture, they immediately flip their head this way. It's one of these horrible Texas soccer tournaments. Starts at 7 in the morning, goes to 7 at night. It's 110 degrees outside. You're sweating all the time. The ultimate parent secret, thank God they lost. We don't have to come back tomorrow. All right? Your kid comes running over and says, go get pizza. And your child says, no, I'm going with Emily. See you tomorrow. Bye. They just dissed you after you spent 12 hours out there sweating. But if you didn't show up, did they notice? Showing up is a whole part of the game, doesn't it? Showing up is a huge part of the game. Now, this is a little bit weird to talk about, but I think it's important. It's not going to apply to universities directly, but it has some application here. Every one of these guys say it's nice you go to birthday parties, it's nice you go to weddings, it's nice you go to anniversaries, nice you go to community events. But the one thing as a leader they're forced to do, and they think is really important to do, is to go to funerals. They say the ultimate secret we have is you always go to funerals. People always remember who came to loved ones' funerals more than they remember anything else. That's when people notice that stuff, don't they? You show up for things that matter to people. Thirdly, appreciate what people do for you, even as what you want, even if it's not what you want. Appreciate what people do for you, even if it's not what you want. What's the case in point of this? Who has kids? Who's lived in the same home for a while with kids? Who has drawings your kids did on the wall already? Who's put them up there? And how many of you are stuck with these drawings for the rest of eternity? And let's be clear, this is not Picasso quality. Your 3-year-old took a bone like this, and you were dumb enough to put it on the wall. Who does not have kids yet? Who does not have kids? I'm going to make this entire day worth it, maybe the week worth it. Anytime when you have a child, your child draws you a picture, look and say, this is absolutely beautiful. Let's send to grandma right now. You have a much nicer house. Look, you would be crazy to tear that picture up, but some of us do exactly the same thing sometimes, even unintentionally. What happens, somebody does something for us, we've got to appreciate what they're doing, even if it's not really what we wanted. Who has family members who give you gifts you would never show in public no matter what was the cause? Holiday gifts, right? What happens? You get that weird sweater. You don't like it, but the person's there, you got to wear it for half an hour while they're there, right? As soon as they leave, put it in the Goodwill bag. True statement? Now here's what I want you to do next time. Put it on, but wait a few months. When they come to visit you in the middle of summertime, say, I got to go shopping. You want to come with me? Sure. Go shopping, go a bunch of places, go into at least one store and say, I love stuff from this store. I'll make you a meaningfully sized bet they will buy your holiday present next year from that store. They think they're pleasing you, don't they? No one intentionally says, I'm going to buy you a gift I know you don't like. They think they're pleasing you. So what you've got to do is recognize what they're doing when they do it, thank them, and then guide them later on. Who's had a student do far more than they needed to do in a class? I've seen teachers say, the horror story I saw one time in a law school at UT was a frightening thing. Faculty member had told students to do one thing. Most students just turn a thin piece of paper. One student turned in an entire binder over a weekend. Professor says, what's the binder? It's what you asked. You wanted the cases. I copied the cases. I annotated them. Blah, 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 blah. Professor, I just wanted a page or two summary. Student says, well, I thought that's what you wanted. Professor says, where's the summary? Student says, in the back. He tears the 2 pages of summary out and throws the rest of it in the trash can. What a jerk. What a jerk. It hurts a lot to this day, doesn't it? He should have said what? Great job. Put it on his bookcase for a few weeks. Made it great, gather some dust, right? Later on, next time the assignment comes up, said to the student individually, tell you what, last time you did something really great. I don't need all that this time. I must have miscommunicated. Here's what I really want. You got to appreciate what they do and then guide them later on, don't you? Fourth characteristic, include people. Include people. People hate being excluded. Who's been invited to me? Who's not been invited to a meeting you thought you should have been invited to? You feel angry for days, don't you? I'll show them. I'm going to piss them off. I'm sure what's going to happen. Again, you get this job in real estate guys get rich in the first place, but you get fantastically wealthy. You have a couple kids. One day your daughter comes and says, Dad, I'm getting married. You go, wonderful. And you hug her and talk for a while, but at one point you say, where and when do you want to get married? And your daughter says this, Dad, we want to get married on December 24th at midnight in Johannesburg, South Africa. You're going to hug your kid and say, I raised you right. Why does every rich and famous parent want destination weddings? But wait a minute, you can still invite everyone, can't you? But no one's going to show up. Plus you get the presents. Think about this, all right? People hate not being invited. They hate being not invited, don't they? They notice it for years. Who still holds a grudge from high school? They didn't invite you to some party and you found out later on. There's still the grudge there, isn't it? I can see it on your face. All right, you're still angry. When you include people, look, you're going to lunch with somebody says, where are you guys going? You can't say, we're going to lunch. You're not. You're going to invite them in. We have a faculty member at UT studies how people psychologically hurt people. And she's done functional magnetic resonance research that's fascinating. The part of your brain that essentially lights up when you experience physical pain, lights up when you're excluded as well. We like being included, don't we? We like being included. So one technique I've seen a lot of very successful teachers do, yes, they have office hours, but they stay after class till every student leaves automatically. What they tell me is fewer people come to office hours when they do that, number one. But oftentimes the immediate's the most important, right? They'll go sit in the hallway afterwards, and then the class comes in and talk till the students get tired. They actually don't need many office hours because they're including people during that event. I need to be done. I'm seeing the hand. Let's see what questions there are, okay? I could go for a whole semester. Yes, ma'am.
What are the other 3 characteristics, unless I wasn't naming number 7?
Okay, narrative. I ran out of time. Narrative, fairness, attentiveness, understanding, and loyalty. Another one's trust. Trust is absolutely key. Okay? Another one is basically strategic communication. Let me give you a couple examples of strategic communication. Anytime you prepare a lecture, prepare a 50-minute one and a 20-minute one. I tell execs, prepare a 20-minute presentation and a 5-minute presentation. Because you've got to be able to dumb it down to 5 minutes every time, right? You may not have, who does conferences? All of us done conferences, right? You're the last person on a panel. Everyone wants to leave anyway. Other people eat up your time. If you still try to do your 20-minute pitch, you're dead. You want a 20-minute one and a 5-minute one every time. You want to chunk your material, for example. The research is compelling about this. My telephone number is 512-471-148. How many of you hate that? My telephone number is 512-471-1948. Does that help better? Why are the dashes to your telephone number? Help you remember? Help you remember, right? We know the magic number chunks now seems to be 3 when it comes to public performances. Folk wisdom, Southern Austria, Eastern, Western Austria, Southern Germany. Beast of focus is all good things come in 3s. I find a brilliant excuse for additional dessert. Take one, I'll go things come in 3s. Bad things in the States seem to happen in 3s. Most governments organize the 3 major bodies. All right? Most religions, 3 major characters. Okay? How do we know, and empirically stated in Cambridge years ago, looked at applause patterns when presidents and prime ministers talked. President goes A and B, you never hear applause. Goes A, B, C, and D, you never hear the person talking because they're applauding already. So if you have 3 reasons of doing something, 3 points you want to make, you're more impactful. So lectures that are organized in 3s, people seem to remember better over a period of time. So when you're writing essays in high school, you had an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, correct? In the body of your lecture, in the body of your essay, well, how many points are you supposed to have? 3. So structuring is the other thing, okay? You've got to think about how do you give that quick pitch. I'll tell you what I tell companies, and I work with entrepreneurs at the university. We have a lot of researchers trying to make money and come up with great ideas. I work with a bunch of them in a program we have there. I always say, draw for me a billboard of your idea. You're not ready to pitch your idea, you can draw me a billboard. 1 picture, no more than 8 words. They have a horrible time doing it, because they know too much, don't they? Expertise is knowing what's not important as opposed to what is important. Who does introductory classes? I have the most respect I can, because you probably know 900 times what you're talking about in class. Your job is to curate the material, to cut it down. You don't believe me? Drive 35, look at a Buc-ee's ad. I'm going to say Buc-ee's. How many know ads already? Who drives between Austin and Houston sometimes in 71? There's a place you stop on the way. What's it called? The place with the kolaches? Huruska's. Yeah. Huruska's. Buc-ee has put a poster, a big billboard out there. Just a huge billboard of 1 urinal with phrase, "You can wait." It's just brilliant. That's all they do say. 1 picture, 3 words, and I get the message immediately, can't I? Okay? So those are what we're talking about otherwise. Perhaps another time we'll be able to continue that.
Okay, and unfortunately with that we are out of time, which is sad for us but good for the students who are coming in next. If you have students that you're like, go ahead and text them right now so they can run over, because they're probably already in the JPL. And we want to just give a huge round of applause and thank you to Dr. Daly.
If you have anything else, email me. She has my email address, okay? It's daily@austin.utexas.edu. But she has my address. So if you have other questions, email. How's that sound? Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.